Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday Night Live from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. I see Shy Gal and Therapist You Know, and Jonna Moore, and Teresa Clay, and Afton, and Cat Flap Carnage. Love that name. Thank you guys all so much for stopping by, and for all of the new names that I'm seeing some new folks here. Sarah Mia, Shelly Malone, thank you guys so much for stopping by. If I'm saying your name because I don't recognize it and you've been here before, well, then I apologize. But if it is your first time here, welcome. And to everyone who's watching on Facebook and X, thank you for stopping by. Let me introduce myself. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Joshua Ritter. I'm a former prosecutor with the LA District Attorney's Office. I left there to go into private practice as a criminal defense attorney, and this is Courtroom Confidential, where we do our very best, as best that we can, to present to you both sides of the courtroom. And this is Wednesday Night Live, your midweek check-in on all things true crime. And if this is your first time, you are in for a treat. Even if it's not your first time, even if it's your 50th time, you're still in for a treat, because we have a very special guest tonight that I'm excited to chat with about some topics that we don't get enough of an opportunity, I feel like, on this channel to talk about thoroughly. Tonight's guest is Dr. Patrice Berry. She is a psychologist. She also has her own YouTube channel called Dr. Patrice Berry Psychologist Reacts. We're going to send you the link. Please check it out. Please subscribe. Do yourselves a favor. You're really going to enjoy it. And we're going to go through some cases that have mental elements to it, mental health elements to it. We're talking about Ruth Miller and Bionca Ellis and Brian Walshe cases we've all been following, but now the mental health aspects are going to play a role in all of that. While we're talking about that, as we like to do on Wednesday nights, we're going to run a poll, and we've got some great cases for you tonight. First of all, some that you probably have not heard of. First of all, a case by the defendant's name is Howard Rubin. He is a New York financier. He's incredibly wealthy, but he also had a sex dungeon, and he liked to electrocute people. And we can talk about that case and some of the horrific text messages that he was sending to his personal assistant about the joy that he had in torturing some women. He's been arrested, and thank God for that. We could also talk about a really tragic case out of New Jersey where two teens were hit and killed on an e-bike in a hit and run. Maria Niotis and Isabella Salas. And they were killed by, allegedly, a young man who was obsessed with and stalking one of those teen girls. Really sad case out of New Jersey. And then finally, there's the case of Thomas Brown. This is a random murder that took place in the Arizona desert. Two young folks were killed while camping by a complete stranger, and that man has been arrested. According to authorities, his name is Thomas Brown. So those are your three options: Howard Rubin, the case of Maria and Isabella, or Thomas Brown. We will run that poll starting now. As always, please stay to the end for announcements. We do have some changes I want you guys to be aware of, but take a moment right now, take a deep breath, collect yourself, center yourself, and hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with somebody who you think might enjoy it. Farm Girl, thank you so much for kicking us off by gifting a membership. Always highly appreciated. All right, enough with your chatter, Ritter. Get to our guests. Hello, Dr. Berry. Do you want me to call you Dr. Patrice Berry or Dr. Berry, or what is your pleasure?
Either one works.
Okay.
So,
I like Dr. Berry. I'm going to stick with that then. How are you? Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you again for the invitation. I've watched your channel, and so it's an honor to be able to be here.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind. Well, it's an honor for us to have you on, because I can manage to stumble my way through almost all of the legal issues that we talk about. But when these psychological issues come up, I know kind of how they're argued in court, but I don't know exactly what is going on behind the scenes, especially what these experts are taking a look at. So we chatted a little bit before we went live, and already the conversation was great. And I was thinking to myself, let's save this because this is good stuff and I want people to hear it. And all three of the cases that we're talking about tonight have really interesting psychological aspects to them So I want to jump into this first one because this one is the one that really got me thinking about this episode and having you on. And that is the case of Ruth Miller. It's a very tragic case. This was out of Atwood Lake, Ohio on August 23rd. Ruth Miller, along with her husband, first her husband, both of them jump into this lake in some sort of act of faith, according to what they tell authorities. She then later on returns to get her 4-year-old son, Vincent, takes him down to the lake in their golf cart and drowns him in the lake. Some of the statements are that she threw him in the lake. Others have described it as drowning him. In any case, this 4-year-old boy loses his life. She then takes her 15-year-old daughter and her twin 18-year-old sons and tries to do the same with them in the golf cart. They are able to escape. Now, here's where it becomes interesting for the purposes of our conversation is when authorities arrive, she is not shy in telling them what goes on. She tells them things along the lines of, in an act of faith, she wanted to be swallowed by a fish. She says that talking about her son, I threw him in the lake and I gave him to God. Not at all, not at all trying to hide what she did. She said about her son, he's sweet. I love him. I gave him to God. And then she says, in reference to God, I'm guessing, he is real and he loves you and he is coming soon. So my question to you is, we, meaning me, not people who are doctors like yourself, I look at this and I go, well, this is obvious insanity. But the question becomes, what if this is truly her religious belief, right? Many people have done many bizarre things in the name of faith. And how do we start to distinguish that? Do you follow what I'm saying? It's a really interesting question.
Yes, and religious psychosis. So if I was assessing her, I would want to see, did she meet criteria for some type of psychotic disorder? And I mentioned to you before the stream that my doctorate is from Regent University, where I learned how to ethically integrate faith into practice. Because my undergrad, my professors, they kind of talked about psychology and faith being completely separate. And I wanted to know, for people that were interested in addressing their faith, I wanted to be able to do it in an ethical way. And one of the first things you would do is talk with her religious leaders. And it's my understanding that when they talked with the church that she attended, they confirmed that this is not what they believe. This is not what they preach. And so this would not be an instance of the church told me to do this. This really does seem like this was something that but then the husband, I really have questions about what was going on with the husband too, because it seems like he jumped in and what really happened there. And but there's a faith that heals and there's a faith that hurts. And anytime somebody is saying that religion is telling them to hurt themselves or somebody else, I want to check in with, is that consistent with everyone else? The easier things are, so if I have a client that's telling me they're hearing the voice of God, we check in to see but if the voice of God is telling them to harm themselves, to do where it sounds like is this coming from within you, or is this truly something else? Because there can be these religious delusions. There can be situations where people are having a mental health crisis, and we know that it's mental health when it responds to medication. And I once had somebody at a church, their adult child was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and they were trying to figure out, is this spiritual or is it not? And my question was, what happens when they're medicated? And they're like, they're stable when they're medicated. And it's like, okay, that's not spiritual. That's if the and so I have a dark sense of humor. And so what I said was, demons don't respond to medication. Like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Just don't.
Yeah.
And so I get very concerned because there are some churches that don't believe in medication, that don't believe in
Sure.
certain things. And if I am working with somebody that's from a tradition where the entire religion doesn't believe in medication, doesn't believe in mental health, then we do have to figure out how can we find safety. But I have known situations where even where the person was uh, they came from a religion that did not believe in mental health, but when somebody was trying to harm themselves, they encouraged them to go to the hospital. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yes.
And they were like, "Oh, no, for you." Like, "Yeah, like, in general, we say, but no, like, this is getting unsafe. You need help that's beyond what we can provide." And I respect I respect leaders that do that, and when I'm the treating professional, I collaborate with that church to make sure that I'm not doing or saying something that goes against what this person believes. Because if their leader comes in and is also on board with, "Hey, let's give this medication a try," that person, their treatment is going to be better if we can include their community in their treatment.
It's such a fascinating question, and you said so many things that were that made me stop, and I took some notes, so I want to go back and talk about some of them. But just the idea of, you know, if we try to be completely secular and look at all sorts of different religious beliefs that, by the way, are widely accepted,
Yes.
right? We talked a little bit about this ahead of time. If you are completely secular about this, the idea that people would say, "Oh, well, my Savior died and was raised from the dead 3 days later, and I go to church on Sundays and I eat of his flesh and I drink of his blood." You could say, well, that obviously shows some sort of mental unrest, but this is a faith that
Mhm,
many people believe and is widely accepted, and we don't at all at this point consider that to be some sort of mass delusion.
mhm,
But you do start to get into some of these other faiths that have more extreme views. As you pointed out, some don't believe in any kind of medical intervention. And at what point are we talking about, well, hey, these are people who are not unhealthy people between their two ears. They're people that just happen to believe something very, very extreme in from your perspective, but not necessarily from their own.
mhm.
And I was thinking, you talked about people who say, well, I've heard the voice of God. I mean, we hear this
A lot.
all the time from people. Sports figures say
Mhm.
God's hand played a role in this. God told me to go ahead and throw that touchdown. God, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, where where does that line get crossed? It's such a, I imagine, difficult question from your perspective in the work that you do.
And I work with people from all different faiths, from all different religions,
Right.
and I'm a pretty liberal person in general, so it's good. So, I don't market myself as a Christian psychologist or as a Christian because people have in their mind what they think that means, and that's
Right.
not that's not me. And so when we talk about how do we kind of determine what's generally held and what's not, that can change as a culture and it can depend. So there are countries, so like there are countries where they believe in seeing spirits, and
Mhm.
that would be very common that people in that area that they talk about seeing spirits. There are people that practice, you know, spells or do different things, and they believe that fully. Now, when it comes to mental health, that's where my thing is, does medication impact it?
Yeah.
And if the person is more stable with medication, then a it's not a spiritual thing for me. And in my training, we also looked at um so I would have a problem. So like if I had a client that believed when they made a mistake, they had to do something harmful to themselves. And if their leader also believed that, then like that would like if that's what this church was
Right.
encouraging them,
Right.
then I would probably have to consult with I would have to figure out how do I keep this person safe. Um Thankfully in my practice that has never happened. When it's come to a point of safety, normally in the work I've done, when somebody is coming in for help, there it what was happening with them was different from what their larger group believed. And we were able to challenge their beliefs with what their larger group believed. And I want to be careful that I'm not putting my beliefs on the person.
Sure. Sure.
So that's why I always go back to, wait a minute, is that consistent with what you believe or with what your larger group, or I might have to consult with their spiritual leader to kind of figure out where things are.
You almost have to calibrate yourself to their belief system first to
Yes.
get like a baseline of what is acceptable or not. Um, Sorry.
No, no, no. 'Cause
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that was
no,
the
no,
way
no.
I was thinking about it in my head.
And as you said it, because there are times when the church might believe one thing, but for their treatment. So I work with adopted children and
Mhm.
foster youth. And I have, for all the kids I work with, so I'm a big believer that physical discipline does harm, and especially for adopted and foster youth. Foster youth, normally it's the agency says you can't, but with adopted youth, so sometimes I have to have difficult conversations with family of, hey, this is going to be harmful. My work can't happen if you do. And so that's where I will sometimes challenge someone's belief.
Mm.
If it does go against treatment, and that there's research to back it, and all those things. Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. You said something else that got me thinking about, because this case has got another interesting wrinkle. It's not just mom who was having these extreme beliefs. Dad also had extreme beliefs. And the story being reported is that they both, in the middle of the night, feeling that they needed to display their faith to God, go down to this lake and jump in. And then they get out, and dad, his name is, I'm blanking on it right now and I feel so bad, but the father, her husband, decides that wasn't good enough and he didn't display his faith enough to God, and goes back to the lake, and he is later found dead, drowned. And they've not charged her with his murder, and they've described his death as being an accidental death. So now you've got, if that is true and she didn't cause his death and he did that on his own, now you've got two people who've got this kind of delusion, if we want to use that term, that they're sharing together. Have you seen that? How does that work?
So there is something called a shared delusion that
Marcus Miller is their name. His name. Thank you, Tiffany.
it is possible to have a shared delusion or a shared psychosis, and where two people are believing the same thing. Because also imagine being the 15 and the 18-year-olds where
Yeah.
mom is saying, and so I'm hoping those children are getting therapy. I'm glad they did not witness what happened to their younger brother, but to the 4-year-old, but I'm also, my heart breaks for them too, because they're probably, because mental health professionals, the investigators, everybody is gonna try to ask, "How was mom's behavior before?" There are likely gonna be people that meet with them. They will probably have to testify, especially the 2 18-year-old twins. They may have to testify in this case, either for the state or possibly for the defense. Both sides will likely have questions for them, and so I just hope that they're getting help, because right now, if I tried to drive my child, so my son can't swim. If I tried to drive him, and he'd be like, "No, ma," like, he would fight it. Do you know what I mean? And I want him
Yeah.
to. So
Right.
I want, if I'm doing something wrong, I want for my child, I don't believe in what they call blind obedience. So often in religion, children are taught, obey your parents no matter what. And I teach my child, no, if mommy is wrong, tell me. Like, no, like, no, because that's what
I don't teach my kids that. They don't. Daddy's never wrong. But go ahead. Sorry.
that, like, no, like, if I'm wrong, if I'm asking you to do something that is harmful,
Right.
no, like, that you get to speak up. Now, if we have to go to the dentist and the dentist has to clean your teeth, then,
Right.
uh-oh, then we might have
Right.
to, buddy, I know you don't like it. I know, but, like, we're here. But if it's something like this, I'm so glad that the witnesses called, because imagine if nobody had called the police in this situation.
Right. Right. My God. Let me take some questions here because people are really responding to this conversation. Pantufel, thank you so much. Says Dr. Berry and Josh together. Live brings me joy. Thank you so much. Will you bring us joy for being here? Annalie Finch with a super sticker. Appreciate you. Teresa Clay gifting a membership. Very highly appreciated. Two Dog Mom with the same thing. Love it. The membership gifts. Appreciate that, you guys. Here's a question, and I think we kind of touched on this, but Math Geek says, what if the faith leader is the one showing the behavior? Are there ways to help them? And that you kind of touched on that you'll look to their leader. What are they kind of saying? But what if they're the one? And I think you kind of referenced this with the idea of people who would harm themselves or something in an act of faith.
So that's when I would need to assess, are they in a cult? Are they in a high demand or high control group? Because
Right.
that is possible. I'm 43, so I remember it was the ones that were trying to catch the spaceship. It
Right.
was they wore the
The
stickers.
Hail Bop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in those situations, because cult leaders by definition are often narcissistic, they don't listen to other people, they encourage their members to not listen to others. And so if you can't listen to other people, if the person can't get feedback, that's when I get very concerned. Thankfully, so I've sometimes advised pastors or ministry leaders on how to because sometimes a pastor will make a blanket statement about, you know, if you have faith, you'll never have anxiety. Well, there are people in their congregation that have anxiety, and
Right.
that's going to be like, that isn't going to go over well. And so I'm thankful that there are people that are looking to make sure that people are healthy in their ministries. And so if the person was believing some very outlandish things, that's when I would try to get more information. If you're ever concerned that somebody might be in a cult, never ever say, I think you're in a cult. Like, you start asking questions about to get an idea of how does the group take outside information?
Yeah.
You know, is there anybody over? Because some organizations have like a pastor, and then sometimes they have like a church that's over it. Or sometimes it might be one of the leaders, but there's a hierarchy. And so sometimes talking to somebody above that person. But if I did run into a situation like that, I would be assessing, is this a safe spiritual community? And if it's not, I'm not going to tell the person I don't think this is safe. I'm going to ask them questions. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
here's
Tease it
where
out. Yeah.
so that they then make a decision about what they do moving forward.
Uh, as you're talking, I'm thinking too from the legal perspective.
Mm.
We don't allow religion to just be a complete shield to all type of behavior either. From a criminal perspective, that yes, there's the First Amendment. Yes, there's the protection of freedom of your practice of your religion. But if that becomes harmful, it can even the government will shut it down. It will feel like, no, you've reached a point where this isn't really the practice of religion. This is the practice of a cult. Okay, I want to move to another case because there's a lot for us to chat about. This one is one that just breaks my heart, but I can't even begin to think about the final moments of this young man's life and what his mother was witnessing. And she actually testified in this case today, but we're talking about the case of Bionca Ellis. This took place on June 3rd of last year in North Olmsted, Ohio. She stole a knife from a grocery store nearby, and then she goes out and she stabs this young man to death. He's 3 years old. His name is Julian Wood, in front of his mother. In fact, his mother was harmed during the attack. She saw her own son died in her arms. Today or earlier this week, actually, she testified, and I want to read some of this stuff. It's not really so much germane to our conversation, but I feel like this woman's voice needs to be heard. She said how I moved, this is a quote from her, and she stabbed him in the side of his face, and then she stabbed me. I couldn't believe this was happening. It was so fast. She stood up and stabbed him in the back, and he was crying, and she just walked away like nothing. She just walked away. And I guess that does kind of go towards our conversation, because she was at one point declared not competent to stand trial. And you actually have some thoughts on that. Then she regained competency, and now we're discussing the issue of insanity. So kind of walk us through what's happening here.
Yes. And I think a little later, you'll probably talk about the difference between insane at the time of the crime and then competent for trial, because for competence for the trial, you have to be able to understand who the judge is, who your lawyer is. You have to be able to aid in your defense. And she seemed psychotic. And a person can be psychotic and still be responsible for the behavior that they engaged in. And so I watched her initial arraignment. And when she was asked to say her name, she would she was speaking gibberish. She would start speaking, and I don't know that she spoke a lot of Spanish. Oh, she was answering C. So instead of just saying yes, she would answer in Spanish, and her behavior was just very, very strange. And I've worked in inpatient units, and her behavior looked very psychotic to me. And so she did not seem competent to stand trial. During one of the in-person sessions, she was smirking, and a lot of cameras caught that smirk because that was the image that was plastered, all over YouTube thumbnails. But she did not look stable to me, and I believe after that she ended up she's likely back on her prescribed medication, and how she's appeared in court has been very different than how she presented in those first few trials. And the Ruth Miller case, because at the time, because she admits to the cops exactly what she did. She's waiting for them to witness this miracle of, oh my gosh, y'all are gonna find my husband in this big fish. And she does not seem to understand that anything that she did was wrong. In this case, Bionca Ellis had been in police custody earlier that day, and she had accused them of stealing money from her. And so that's where there's a part of me that wonders, did she do a crime to end up back in jail thinking she would get back to her money? Do you like that?
Interesting. Wow.
And
Very interesting.
that's just that's my speculation. So,
Sure.
and because she never said that, she never did any of that. But that as soon as she left the police station, that's when she went to the thrift store, and then that's when she went to the grocery store. And it was after she had accused them of that she didn't get some of her property back. And so that's where it was like, are you trying to do a crime so that you end up back there to then get whatever you think they owed you? And so that's when if that was true, and we won't be able to prove it because she would have had to say that, then it's like, okay, you knew what you did was a crime, and that wouldn't be insanity, like the way that our legal system defines it.
Absolutely right. To me would be premeditation and planning. And even if she had a very cavalier attitude about the murder itself, she knew what she was doing was wrong because she knew it would get her arrested. Again, we're both kind of speculating here, but that's a very interesting theory that gets us to our point about, you talked about the difference between competency and insanity. It's a temporal difference. We're talking about how is the person's mental state at that moment when you're dealing with competency, as opposed to insanity is a question for at the time of the crime. But there are also very different standards. As you pointed out, competency can be a very low standard. Do you know who this person is? Do you know who your lawyer is? Do you know who the judge is? And when you see a person that's incompetent, in my experience, they're as you described, they can't even really communicate on the most basic level. When they're asked a question in court, they start to mumble. That's what we're talking about, not somebody who's able to, communicate with the judge. But insanity is an entirely different question. It asks, at the time of the crime, did they appreciate what they did was wrong? At its most basic form, that's what it is. So when you hear testimony from the mother saying she just walked away like nothing, or another gentleman testified this week, his name is Travis Bush, who says, I pulled up next to her. I asked her, I said, do you know you stabbed that kid? I mean, this is incredible to have this from your perspective, to have this piece of information. And her response was to shrug. She just shrugged her shoulders and walked away. Tell me, if you're trying to analyze just the small information I've given you, but does that behavior indicate somebody who knows what they did was wrong? Could it still be somebody who knew what they did was wrong, but just doesn't care? Because doesn't caring doesn't mean insanity, right? It's a very interesting scenario here that's playing out.
And I would want to hear from the experts that did psychological testing. And I would want to know more about her diagnosis and everything as well. It sounds like she had a history of not being on her medication and being aware of her diagnosis. And her case reminds me of the gentleman that attacked the Las Vegas judge. He had initially attempted an insanity, but then they realized, okay, like that's probably not gonna work. And and so a person can have a mental health diagnosis and still understand, and it's hard because you're assessing them you're assessing them after.
Right.
And because you would first have to get her competent so that she could cooperate with the assessment.
Right.
Because if she's actively psychotic, you can't do the assessment. And there are some diagnoses where they may not remember all of their behavior in the other state. And so it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And this is going to be a battle of the experts, and the
Yeah.
jury is the one that's going to get to decide.
Yeah.
I've personally seen that sometimes I think when somebody harms somebody else's child, so I think as a society, we all look at that and I think we try to, because it seems so outlandish, like what, because this is senseless. There was
It
no
is.
reason.
Yeah, that's something I should point out. There is no connection between them. There was no altercation. She didn't interact with her ahead of time. It was just a random attack.
And that's where some people look at that and they think that behavior is, but the legal definition of insanity is that you did not appreciate that what you did was wrong.
Right.
And I like I said, I need to hear from those experts. The Ruth Miller video, I think she has a good chance of possibly unless there's some faking, unless there's some testing that's done and they're able to clearly say no, she knew this was wrong. That case I think has a good chance she might be found not guilty by reason of insanity, which means she
Wow.
goes to a mental hospital for a long time. So
Yeah.
it's not that you go home, you're committed to a mental hospital. And I'm reminded of the is it Lindsay Clancy? I'm bad with names because
Mm.
she keeps coming up to
This is
possibly.
the mother that took the life of her
Yeah.
3 children and then jumped out the window. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
but so not her. The other there's another one because she was already found not guilty by reason of insanity, and she's had multiple chances of possibly getting to come out of
Oh,
jail of the mental hospital, and she's like, "No, this is where I belong." As
yeah.
I'll have to find the name of that case. Susan Smith,
Good.
maybe.
That'll give me an excuse to make you come back on. When you find that name, I'm gonna have you come back on.
Yeah.
Um,
Andrea
I
Yates, that's what it is.
Oh, yes,
It's
Yates. Yeah,
it's
yeah, absolutely. Andrea Yates.
mhm.
Yeah, very famous case dealing with all of these issues. I got a couple of questions here that I think are very interesting to our discussion. Katrina Bunny, thank you for asking a question, says she managed to walk past tons of other people she didn't attempt to attack. How would that affect her insanity? And I think my question for you is more along the lines of what role would that play in your evaluation of her mental state at that time? That as random as this is, it does seem targeted to some extent, that she's not going after big burly men who might be able to defend themselves, right?
So it depends.
Or people who can run easily. She's going after a little 3-year-old boy who's sitting in a grocery cart at the time. Is there anything that you might pull from that?
And, um So that's where if right after the person is arrested, they say, I attacked the demon or something, or like if
Right,
they
right.
sometimes there's something that they say. I don't think she spoke much. I don't think she gave much of a statement after getting arrested. And so that's where I think some of those mental health evaluations that came later. I'm thinking of cases where the person says, "I didn't realize I was attacking my this. I thought it was something else, or something, or something like that."
Yeah,
Um, you bring up a good point that this was a vulnerable person, but it
yeah.
looked the video of her walking around the store, to me, it looks like she was looking for somebody to attack. And I wish somebody had called. Sometimes people get scared to not be a Karen, but she was walking
Mhm.
around the store with this huge knife. And and and
Nobody does anything. Yeah,
nobody does anything. And now
yeah.
I wouldn't have approached her because it would have been a bad idea to like, she's just walking around the store like this, and it would have been completely okay for somebody to call the police or even somebody at the store to say, "Excuse me, ma'am," but she probably would have attacked somebody that came up to her. I don't know what she would have done. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you this. I I I I do not consider myself a coward, but I'm not gonna approach her, but I feel
Mm.
like I would tell somebody something.
"Excuse
By the
me."
way, this doesn't seem like safe behavior, and she doesn't look all that happy. Jen H asks a really interesting
Mm.
question to me. Um, if someone makes a conscious decision to not take their medication, can they still be held liable or deemed insane? And I think that's so interesting, especially if a person is aware of what happens to them when they stop taking their meds and consciously says, "I don't care, I'm going to get off my meds." Then how do we evaluate their behavior after that?
And remember, the jury is the one that decides
Yeah,
whether or not. So, and when I've seen cases like this, the jury has normally sided in cases where a person has decided not to take their medication, they have a clear diagnosis, and then something they end up doing a crime, the jury likely holds them legally responsible. Like,
yeah,
that's those in the cases I've followed, I haven't seen someone get off on something like that.
yeah,
Daryl Brooks is another famous one, and his behavior in court, but I think he was just being obnoxious, and he was trying to distract, and I don't it was very, very odd behavior, but in a almost a deliberate way. Like, it was just because he could dial it back, because the
right,
judge would just warn him, and then he would stop. Or he would
right,
say, "Hey, I'm gonna do this so that you send me to the room." And then he would start doing the things, and the judge would send him to the room where he would watch via Zoom.
yeah.
And so normally, if somebody decides not to take their medication, their insanity case is a little bit more difficult, I think, for their defense team.
And I think too, that's a decision being made by the jury that might
Yes.
not entirely be in the letter of the law.
Mhm.
The letter of the law doesn't exactly talk about, well, if they don't take their meds, then they're responsible for their actions. But I think, I think it's going to apply to this case as well. Jurors, there's just some things they won't stand for. And I don't, as good an argument as she may have in this case, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for jurors to not acquit her, but even the idea of her going somewhere to some institution when a 3-year-old child lost his life savagely in front of his own mother. I jurors sometimes feel like I don't care what the law says, enough's enough. I mean, listen, I'm not certainly not a proponent for ignoring the law. I'm just saying I know how the world works. I've done enough trials.
And if I was assessing the person, I would wanna make sure that there's no antisocial behavior.
Yeah,
So, antisocial behavior is somebody that has a lot of legal and not but they're continually breaking the law, and this is more of a pattern. And, and yes, when they're medicated, they may do better, or when they're medicated, are they still breaking the law? Because that would kinda point to something else as well.
yeah. All right, we're going to leave that one for now. Another one that's ongoing that I'm going to bug you about in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. But there's another case that has an interesting, a case that we've been following quite a bit on this channel, but it has an interesting new wrinkle in it, and that is Brian Walshe. He is, for those who don't know, accused of murdering his wife, Anna Walshe. This took place over New Year's Day, the holiday, couple of days there in 2023 in Cohasset, Massachusetts. Now, she goes missing. Her work actually reports her missing before he reports her missing. He is observed picking up cleaning supplies at a local Lowe's or Home Depot. He's observed disposing of random items in trash bags around the Cohasset area, a bunch of other circumstantial evidence, not to mention some really suspicious Google searches. So there's plenty of evidence about planning, premeditation, at least, fully being aware of the ramifications of his actions afterwards. That's not exactly why we're discussing this. What happened, though, is recently he was stabbed while in custody. And we reported on this, but it didn't sound like it was the worst injury in the entire world. He got medical attention and was back in the jail facility that same day. His lawyer, Larry Tipton, recently told the court that he needs a competency evaluation. And I want to read a couple of quotes and get your reactions on this. He says, the defendant has made progress, but both mental and physical effects of the violent assault have continued to prevent him from being able to adequately participate in preparing his defense. He has made great effort to do so, but at this time, it is evident that the trauma resulting from the unexplained and sudden attack continues to significantly impact on his ability to work with his attorneys in a manner required as his complex trial approaches. I have never really seen this before, where somebody is claiming that a physical injury, not to his head, he wasn't stabbed in his head, he was stabbed somewhere on his body, has caused a person to lapse into a lack of competency. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I was able to listen to the audio of the hearing, and there was a doctor, I believe it was Dr. Burke, that testified, was able to assess him and do a brief assessment, and this doctor recommended the competency evaluation. And so I am glad that the judge did go on ahead and refer him for that evaluation. So he hasn't been declared competent or incompetent yet. He's just been referred for an evaluation. And once they do that evaluation while he's in the mental health, the behavioral health hospital, if he's not on any anxiety medication or something for sleep, they may place him on something, and that may be enough for because it's my understanding he's struggling with concentration, and that he used to be able to engage in 2-3 hour conversations with his attorney, and now he's having difficulty answering basic questions and remembering what's being said. And so his attorney is questioning, is he going to be able to help out in his defense? And so with that, I am glad that the judge at least referred him for that evaluation, because that would have been, he could have appealed the entire trial if the judge didn't do that.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
I'm not shocked at all. I've seen this happen countless times in court. A defense attorney will usually say the words, "Your Honor, I'm declaring a doubt," and that's it. They immediately send that person over for evaluation. The judge doesn't sit there and go, "Well, he looks fine to me." It's up to, if the attorney says that, then it automatically sets into place some sort of evaluation, because, like, to your point, they want to avoid any kind of appellate issues. But it's interesting to me, and it makes me think of the Donna Adelson case. I don't know how much you followed that one, but she had a bunch of complaints about her comfort level and her ability to sleep and her diet and all sorts of other stuff that was affecting her ability to communicate with her attorneys and her ability to assist in her own defense. But they never went as far as to saying that this somehow affected her competency. And it's almost like this similar arguments being made here. It's that he's just having a rough time and therefore he can't concentrate. I don't see this turning into a competency issue, but do you think it's somehow different?
And I think in her case, she was asking to meet with her special ear, nose, and throat doctor, and she was asking for like, a thicker mattress pad. She never said, I'm not competent. Like
Right.
I think in her appeal, she tried to say that she didn't have enough time to make the decision.
Right.
And I think it was Judge Everett. He was phenomenal. He was like, ma'am, I gave you plenty of chances, hours. There were days.
Yeah.
And we have the record. Your attorney went to the jail and met with you for all this time. No. And so, and then there are some defendants that I don't think would ever raise competence. And for him to bring up competence, because it's my understanding based on the testimony of Dr. Burke that he may have a prior diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. And for him to allow his attorney to raise competence right now, but also he could, because so hospital is going to be nicer than jail. Not
Yeah.
like he's probably gonna feel a little safer there. It's gonna be 21 days, I think, and so we'll see what comes out of that evaluation. His competence can definitely be restored. So if
Yeah.
for some reason they say, "Yeah, right now his short-term memory is significantly impaired," but they will do tests, and I saw Afton mention it, of malingering. And
Yeah.
so malingering is somebody intentionally feigning or faking a mental health diagnosis to try to get a secondary gain. So if they're trying to put off the trial or if they're trying to stay in the hospital longer, these forensic psychologists and psychiatrists are trained for how to recognize real mental health. And often the other mental health, like the other people on the unit will sometimes be like, he's fake. But like, you can't take that. But like, sometimes they'll be like, ain't
Right.
nothing wrong with him.
Right. No, it's an interesting point that you bring up because he doesn't. The only benefit he gets out of this is like a 2-week vacation in the hospital. This doesn't end his trial. Once competency, in fact, what it does is just puts everything on hold. So it's not like he can somehow, be clever like a fox and they will somehow violate some sort of speedy trial right or something because they can't bring him to trial. Everything gets put on hold while his competency is evaluated. So he comes back to the same exact position. So the question might be, well, why would he do that? What advantage does he get out of this? And you brought it up. I think that I'm no psychologist, but I think there's definitely some narcissistic personality traits here at play because you've got a man who was willing to, according to the allegations, if they're true, murder his own wife. And the motive being presented by the prosecution is to avoid federal prison for another crime that he committed, a art fraud scheme, and thinking that, hey, if I'm the sole custodian of my kids, they might not send me to prison. That to me, again, I'm no psychologist, but screams of narcissism. And that would be the same exact type of person to fake competency to avoid trial for a couple of weeks.
And so just so everyone knows, like they will be able to notice. And so the psychologist will say whether they believe the person gave good effort or not. And then there will be some tests where he will not know what to say, like know what the test is asking for. And if it's just that his memory is a little off, and like I said, if they might be able to prescribe a medication that helps him sleep a little bit better. So it is common because his attorney said that he's more jumpy. Like even the jail people have said that he's on edge, and people do believe. So with PTSD, you have to have the symptoms for a period of time, and so he's displaying trauma-like symptoms, but he just hasn't had. There hasn't been enough time for there to be that type of diagnosis. And there are plenty of people in jails that have PTSD, but his attorney is raising the question of competency. And even when the judge was asking him questions during the hearing, he kept having her repeat it. And so that's where the judge was like, I'm not a mental health expert. As a mental health expert saying, yeah, they can't answer this either. So, and they're recommending additional evaluation. So they're going to do an additional evaluation. So.
Yeah, I have a feeling we will be right back to where we left off in a couple of weeks' time. Let me take some questions here before I have to get you out of here. Alicia K. Mayo sounds panicked. She wants to know who stabbed him. Did he stab himself? Do we know? We do know. We do know that another inmate did in fact stab him. I don't think it's been revealed what was the motive behind it. but we know that he did receive some treatment. He didn't stab himself. This was a question that I thought was interesting from the Quiet Fringe. Says, are there laws in place if an individual doesn't feel safe to themselves or to others that they can commit themselves, or would it be dependent on the state? I'm very curious about that.
So in any state, if somebody was not feeling safe, they could go to the emergency room. So the emergency room is where you would go. Please be prepared to wait a long time. There is also the free 988 if you're in the United States. That is our crisis number. That is I believe it's confidential, but it is a number that people can call to get support. And then depending on your area, there can sometimes be crisis centers. So in Virginia, we have what's called we have community service boards that have crisis stabilization teams that will send somebody out to the house. So if you were concerned about a loved one or yourself, that a mental health worker would respond. And I think every police unit responding to a mental health crisis should have a mental health worker with them. Because often police officers are not trained in how to respond to somebody that's and they're the ones that are often the first ones there. I have been prior to getting licensed, I did intensive in-home therapy where I would work one-on-one with clients that we would have to sometimes call 911. Or we would have the non-emergency police line. So if it's not an emergency and if you needed somebody to come to you, you could always call 911 for yourself. And then normally it's going to be a police officer, an ambulance, and a fire truck in Virginia. Depending on your state, that might be a little bit different. But there will be people that will respond to assess the situation. The sad thing is that sometimes, depending on what's going on, because sometimes a person get stable enough to go home. So sometimes the hospital, or in Virginia, you might not find a bed. I know multiple people that have been in the hospital for 2-3 days. And it comes to a point where the hospital has to send them home because when they're in the ER, they have to have somebody watching them 24/7. And sometimes it's like, yes, this person should be admitted. We don't have a bed, and they have to discharge them or find what resources are available to the person. And so it can be a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that those resources are available, and thank you for sharing those with us. Dr. Berry, this has been such a fantastic conversation. Round of applause, everybody, for Dr. Berry. Thank you so much for sharing these insights and your expertise with us. I want to make sure that we share the link to your channel. Where it is. There it is there. Dr. Patrice Berry, and that's how you can find it. And his Psychologist Reacts. Do you got stuff coming up on your channel that you want people to know about? Anything that they might be interested? Some sneak preview on anything?
Yes. And so on Saturday, I will be talking about the Bionca Ellis case. We will see if any of the mental health experts have already testified. And so that's what I'm planning for Saturday, normally around 2 p.m. if nothing else major comes up. And so you can check out my channel, turn on notifications. I am East Coast. You all are y'all are Pacific. I am.
We got you up late. I got to get you to bed.
Thank you again for having me. I like getting, because you know the law part, and so I have the psychology. I am a clinical psychologist, and so I was trained to do. I know forensic work, but it doesn't give me joy. I'd rather work with people that are looking for help, because with forensic, you're often working with people that sometimes do have secondary gain, or there can be a lot. And so that I like covering it on my channel, but in practice, I like doing clinical work. And so
I gotcha.
That's what I do.
This has been a fascinating and enjoyable conversation for me. And I hope that you won't mind if I bug you again to come on to talk about some of these fascinating issues. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too.
She's the best. Go follow her. Go subscribe. Next time she has a video up, make sure that you send her some love from Courtroom Confidential and throw some juice boxes in the chat just to confuse her. She will enjoy it, I'm sure. I loved that. Those topics are so fascinating to me, and I could talk to her for hours because I'm really always curious as to the role that mental health and issues and psychology play in all of this. All right, let's get to our poll. While Kaylin is getting those results together, I want to tell you about Aura. We do our best, you may have noticed, to avoid any kind of ads interrupting this conversation that we had this evening. And so we have tried to do that by getting sponsors. And our first sponsor is Aura. If you have dealt with robocalls or spam emails or leaked passwords, Aura is your all-in-one digital security platform. You get alerts, you get a VPN, an antivirus, password manager, ID theft insurance, and US-based support. And the offer that we have from you from Aura is you can get a 14-day free trial. If you go to aura.com/courtroomconfidential or click on that, scan that QR code, you will get a free 14-day trial. It's free. It's a fantastic product. Tiffany and I use it ourselves. We really enjoy it, and it's a great way to support the show. So please check it out. All right. What won? 42% for Maria and Isabella. We have some time to talk about that, so let's get into it. This case is sad, tremendously sad. You're talking about two 17-year-old girls who lost their lives. There they are, Maria Niotis and Isabella Salas. They lived in Garwood, New Jersey. And my understanding, I'm not familiar with this area of New Jersey, is that it's a really nice neighborhood. It's a really kind of sleepy, suburban-y sort of area, place you would want to raise kids, not a high crime area. If anybody is familiar with that area, please confirm that I'm right on this. But the story goes that Maria, who's on the left there, was being stalked by a young man who's also 17 years old and whose name has not been released by authorities. I will tell you this, the name is out there, and there are articles who have kind of pieced together who likely is the person responsible. So I am going to share with you information that has been shared through media sources about this person, though that person has not yet been identified by authorities. So I hope you understand this. And Dr. Berry says it is such a sad case. It's an incredibly tragic case. But he had a history of stalking Maria to the point that her family had to get a restraining order. I had also read reports of where he had actually been parked in front of her home for weeks on end. I don't know if that meant he was sleeping there or just parked there and stalking her and just basically essentially making life miserable for her. Her and her friend Isabella, who is not apparently the focus of his attention, are on an e-bike on September 29th. And he takes his vehicle, I think has been described as some sort of SUV, perhaps a Jeep, 70 miles per hour, wipes them both out and kills both of them. Just heartbreaking. Compounded with the tragedy of all of this is the idea that it sounds like Maria and her family were trying to get some sort of help, that they had gone to law enforcement in the past, that they had complained about his behavior, that they had gone out to the point of getting their own civil restraining order. And a civil restraining order, as you're finding out here, is as good as the paper that it's written on. If a person does not care, what does that restraining order do for them? The only thing a restraining order is going to do to protect you is if that person shows up in violation of the order, you can call police and say, this person is out here causing me trouble and they're violating a protective order. And that might cause the police to take it a little bit more seriously, but it's not going to stop their behavior. So the most recent information to come out was that, how do I explain this? He had been doing YouTube live streams, and he had been talking about his issue with Maria, likely and that he had been already in trouble for distributing child pornography. Now, my guess, because I've dealt with cases like this many times in the past, is that we're probably not talking typical child pornography, but it was likely photos of other young people that he may have known, other young girls under the age, and distributing that. You see this to a shocking degree with high school kids nowadays, where they are sending each other photographs and then distributing those photographs to their friends. And it really is distribution of child pornography. And it looks like that may have been at play here. Again, we don't know what exactly is behind all of this, because the police have not entirely released all this information, but it could have even been photographs of her. And that was part of him tormenting her. So he's complaining on his live streams about this. After the murder, the murder took place on September 29th. On September 30th, he does a live stream. And he says, there is more to the story that you're not getting, but when the time comes, I will explain it in greater detail. As if he's talking about taking the dog for a walk. Casual, not panicked, unbothered by this whole thing. That stream has since been taken down by YouTube. He was arrested on October 1st, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. It's just a really sad case. Listen, it's sad for a number of reasons, but it's also incredibly sad to me that it looks like this family had been trying to get some help. And that wasn't, the police were not taking it seriously. And I'll tell you, I've run into this situation in my own practice before too, where police seem to view these types of things between young folks as like kids being kids. And, oh, he's just being ridiculous. And, and I'm sure they get a lot of that. I'm sure they get a lot of drama with young people. But when you don't take things seriously and you don't realize that people could be in danger, then things like this happen. Now, I'm certainly not trying to blame the police for his conduct. He's the murderer, allegedly. He's the one who should be held responsible, and no one else. But I am bothered that it seems like law enforcement could have done something to avoid this. All right, I'm going to give us a couple of more minutes and extend this and take the next case on our poll, because we went a little long with Dr. Berry, and I want to make sure that we cover everything that you guys want to talk about. So what was the next one up? Kaylin, I see it here. Howard Rubin with 36%. You guys picked a good one. This is a doozy. Howard Rubin, what a alleged piece of garbage this man is. He's 70 years old. He is from New York, and he is, along with his 45-year-old personal assistant, a woman by the name of Jennifer Powers, been charged with federal sex trafficking crimes for an alleged sex trafficking scheme that took place between 2009 and 2019. And what this alleged sicko was doing was finding women procured by him, by Jennifer Powers, who would find young, attractive girls, but more specifically, girls who were incredibly in dire straits, who were, one of them was described as being so desperate she was living on somebody else's couch, people who were out of money, people who needed help, and he would prey upon them. And again, this is all allegations, and I don't want to keep on saying alleged. This is what prosecutors are saying, that he would find these women who were so desperate that they would agree to participate in very depraved sex acts. Now, when you use that term, agree to participate, I think they agreed to show up to a location. He wasn't snatching them off of the street. Show up to a location in exchange for money. But then what happened after that certainly took a very sinister and evil turn. The recent thing to come out of all of this is the text exchanges between himself and Jennifer Powers and others. I will read you a sampling of these wonderful texts. In response to one of the things he did is he apparently these things would take place either at luxury hotels or he had a penthouse where he built himself what's being described as a sex dungeon. In one text, he's talking to his assistant about how he had put this girl on the quote unquote cross. Her response to him is, I can only imagine what you did to her on that cross. Did you shock her? And I'll let you guess what the next word was there. And he then complains to her about how the electronic device that he would use to shock them was not strong enough. In regards to another victim, he's talking to Powers and he says to her about this girl that she hates it, but she's so desperate. We've got to make her cry. What kind of a sicko does this put? This is the kind of stuff that drives me, infuriates me. I hope they completely bury this man in this federal prosecution. The type of people that exist with their wealth and power and privilege who treat and think about others this way. Susan D says, what a monster. That's the best way to describe him. In another one, he's describing someone and says, I don't care if she screams, that was accompanied then by a smiling face or laughing face emoji. This is going to be fun. This is the way he talked about women that he had essentially tortured. Then in another exchange, and this is the last one, so I'll give you guys a break and you can take it off mute if that's if you were hiding from all of this. He's talking about a situation where he was involved in a threesome and he was coordinating with the other female who is an unnamed co-conspirator, the plans that he had for this person. And they went on to him and this other woman to brutalize this gagged victim, punch her in her breasts and head, and to the point that she was able to free herself by biting him in the finger and escape. Then he panics, realizing, oh, wait a minute, maybe I went too far. And he texts Jennifer Powers saying, it got very rough, Jen. We need to be very, very, very nice. Very important trust, very important. So you could tell that probably just meant we need to give her a whole bunch of money so that she doesn't go and complain to anyone. Absolute sicko, psychopath, allegedly. We will see. It's unfortunate this is in federal court, so they won't be able to have cameras in the courtroom, but we will continue to follow this one closely so you guys know how it all turns out. And I imagine he's hiring the most expensive lawyers in the entire world, but I don't think there is a lawyer on the face of this earth that could get this man out from under the horrible acts of torture that he committed and then laughing about it afterwards. What absolute sickos. Anyhow, let's do a dramatic shift in mood and talk about our website, shall we? If you haven't already, please go check out thecourtroomconfidential.com. And that is where you can do one of several things. One, you can leave us a message for this Sunday Fun Day. We need a few more, folks. Jump in. If this is your first time, I love first-time callers. Jump in. Get past those nerves. Do it. It's fun. You'll enjoy it. Leave us a message at thecourtroomconfidential.com. Just click on that button that says leave us a message. Membership. Maybe you saw some people getting some free memberships tonight and you said to yourself, well, I want to be part of the cool club. Well, then you go to thecourtroomconfidential.com and click on become a member and you can find out all about that. But most importantly, you can go to our shop. What is it? What is the color this evening, folks? We've got Cadaver Lilac, very, very dark therapist, you know. I like that. Parish Petunia, that's a good one. Therapist, you know, coming in hot. Or Obituary Orchard. What else do we got? Posthumous Purple. I got to take your keyboard away from you, therapist, you know. But all great guesses. What is it, Tiff? What is the color tonight? I don't know. She's probably putting the kids away. I think is this just the blue? Is this our Courtroom Confidential blue? And I'm just in a weird lighting this evening. I don't know. But if you want to check out these colors and all the other fun colors that we have, go to thecourtroomconfidential.com, and we've got different designs, and we've got tumblers, and we've got mugs, and all sorts of fun stuff for you guys. CC Blue Crew, named by Teresa Robinson. That's right. This is our CC Crew Blue in honor of the Dodgers playing this evening and hopefully cinching the series against the Phillies. If there's any Philly fans in the chat, my condolences, but I do not wish you luck this evening. I wish you great friendship and good fortune in all your life, but just not in this game tonight. All right. Monday, what did you guys miss? We had the true crime docket where we talked about Brian Walshe and Corey Richins and Mark Sanchez. Crazy case about Mark Sanchez. Also, Tyrese Gibson's in a little bit of trouble. Today, by the way, I did something fun. If you guys remember Kennedy, she was an MTV VJ, and she's now a host and personality on Fox News. She invited me to come on her podcast called Kennedy Saves the World. So that's out right now. We'll give you guys the link. Check it out. We had a conversation about Sean Diddy Combs. She's fabulous and she's hilarious. Go check it out. Do me a favor. If you do listen to it, send her some love from Courtroom Confidential. Tell them that Courtroom Confidential sent you and that you enjoyed the conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. She had me laughing pretty hard. Finally, stay tuned this week, Friday. This is new. I'll keep on announcing it till we all get used to it. We are going to be doing our weekly roundups on Friday, and we're going to be doing them live. So this one is taking place this Friday live at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Please join us. Be in the chat. It's going to be fun, and we're going to cover everything that took place this week. The Off-White Lotus says Josh was great on STS yesterday too. Well, thank you so much. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I was on Surviving the Survivor yesterday talking to Joel about Corey Richins, I think it was. So check that out as well. Send him some love. And then Sunday, as always, your favorite day of the week, Sunday Fun Day, coming up this Sunday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Leave us a message. Go to thecourtroomconfidential.com and ask us a true crime question. CrimeCon is coming up May 29th through 31st of 2026. It will be in Las Vegas. If you would like to go and you haven't purchased a ticket yet, we're going to give you 10% off if you enter the word courtroom, all in caps, all one word, at checkout. We would love to see you there. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to come up quicker than you think. I know it's May, but it's going to get here in the blink of an eye. Finally, thank you to Math Geek and Dr. Martina and Dr. Pepper Princess, Chicago Marie, Amy Jo, Kay Davidson, Patty Mahaffey, and Judge McJudgerson. Thank you guys for becoming a member. Here's all our membership tiers. If you're thinking about joining, thank you to Afton, Shy Gal, Kathy, and therapists for being so fantastic. Again, a big shout out and thank you to Dr. Patrice Berry for coming on this evening. Wasn't that fantastic? Wasn't she great? Please, thank you guys for sending her some new subs, and let's bug her to be on again soon. I think so. Thank you to Kaylin for putting up with me and for making this show run so smoothly. And thank you to Tiffany for being, as always, the best thing that ever happened to me. Take care, you guys. We will talk to you all on Friday. Take care, everybody. Oops.